Hey, g'day, it's Presso. Thanks for stopping by. Now, I've got a video to show you today about metal finishing. Now, a while ago I started a series called Metal Finishing with Mark, and in that series I looked at various forms of decorative and protective finishing for metal. Now, these are things like anodizing, parkerizing, electroplating, etc. And in all of those videos you do require a fair amount of equipment to get results. But in this particular one, we can do a form of electroplating which doesn't require a lot of expensive equipment. Now, there is a one-off cost, and that is for purchasing the electroplating solution, but after that you can get away with fairly basic equipment. I'll show you what you need shortly, but the subject of today's video is this little teapot. Now, this belonged to my mother-in-law. She passed away just recently, but she made it well into her 90s. And although she didn't have a lot of belongings left, my daughter was looking through some of her things because we were looking to pass on some of her belongings to relatives. But my daughter said she'd like to have this little teapot for her own. Now, the only problem is that there are some issues with it. There's some damage, and that's what I want to try to repair in today's video. So let's have a closer look at the teapot and then we'll see what we need to do. So this is the teapot. It's a very elegant silver plated teapot, and although it's not as ornate as some that you might purchase from the period, I still think it's really elegant. And I was just looking inside and I saw there was a note in there, and it's in my mother-in-law's handwriting, and it says teapot, jug, sugar bowl. There are actually two other parts to this set. Gift from co-employees at Airworks for our wedding in 1950, Stan and Jean. So my mother-in-law lived in England, and her husband was a rather dashing mechanic with the RAF, and he specialised in repairing propellers and doing maintenance on propellers. And Airworks was the company that he was working for after the Second World War. Now, as you can see, there is a bit of damage on this. Now, it's been dropped on the floor at some point, and the base of the teapot has been dented inwards. And on the other side, there's a patch where the silver plate has been removed, or has basically corroded off. And when my wife was going through the box with this in it, she came to me and said, "What's that purple stain on the side of the teapot?" And it looked like somebody had put dicam on the surface of the silver plate. So I took it down to the workshop here and I tried cleaning it off with acetone. I tried thinners, I tried methylated spirits. Nothing would remove it. And eventually I got some silver polish and started to clean over that surface there, and lo and behold, it went straight through, and what we're looking at there now is the nickel silver. So on the base of this teapot, it actually says, I don't know if you can see it there, it says EPNS, so that stands for electroplate nickel silver. So the underlying metal in this teapot is nickel silver. It's actually it doesn't contain any silver at all. It's an alloy of copper, and at first sight it looks like brass, but it's not. Now, it's much tougher than brass, and with the damage on this rim here, I thought I could probably easily bend that back with a mallet, but it turns out it's a lot tougher than just regular brass. And I was worried that if I started hammering that with a metal hammer, I'd put dents in it and basically have to remove a lot of material in the end to get a smooth finish that I could plate over. So I've got to think of a way of forging that material back out again to remove that dent without basically bashing it with a hammer. And we'll look at that in a minute. And with this patch here, all this needs is a little bit of a polish, and then I can plate over that surface there and restore the silver plate. But before I go any further, I really need to deal with this issue here, this dent, and if I can't get that out, there's no point going any further. So let's have a look at what I have in mind to get that repaired. So the first thing I thought of was to make a pair of hammer forms. This one here is made of some 18mm thick steel. It's been machined on the rotary table in the Bridgeport. So I set this up on an aluminium pallet on top of the rotary table. I held it down with a set of replica Mighty Bite clamps. Now, I made these in a video some time ago, and they're great for doing this sort of work because you can bring the material up off the table and support it on the clamps, and then you can machine right down past the bottom edge of the stock. And I ran a 10mm cutter backwards and forwards, and then took a final cut full depth to clean up that surface, and that's just been polished on a Scotch-Brite wheel, so it's pretty good as it is. Now I also made a female version of the same radius, or actually not the same radius, this is the outside radius of the base of the teapot. So it's about a 2mm difference between the two radii that you can see there, and that's the thickness of the rim on the base of the teapot. Now I really don't want to be hammering this stock. I want to be able to see if I can press it first. So if I can get some sort of hydraulic pressure on these two dies, or the two hammer forms, I may be able to forge out the dent in the base of the teapot without doing any hammering. Now while I was at it, while I had the rotary table set up, I made a pair of these blocks here. Now these are made of that composite decking material. I've got a lot of this stuff that's left over from a job that I did, and it's really nice to work with. It's a bit like sort of dense hardwood, and I figured that I could use this. If I need to hammer it, I'll hammer into this stock first, and I made another one which I can use as a sanding block. So later on, this damaged area is almost certainly going to have some marks in it, so I figured that I could use that as a sanding block to clean up that surface and keep the appearance of a continuous curve in that. Well, it's the next day and I've had to think about this overnight, and I've decided to use the hydraulic press as a punch and a die to help me to forge out that dent in the base of the teapot. This is the block of steel that I machined with the external radius to match the inside curve of the rim of the teapot, and I've welded that to a piece of heavy steel plate, and that's been clamped down to the bed of the hydraulic press. This is the upper section which is going to form the outside curve of the rim of the teapot. That's been welded to a collar, and that's clamped onto the spindle of the hydraulic press. Now I've moved everything around so I've got sufficient clearance. The two radii match up as best as I can see, and I've got the masking tape on the top section of the curve as well. So I'm going to put the teapot in there, and we're just going to bring that ram down slowly, and we can check it, and I think that's going to be more repeatable and less damaging to the nickel silver than hammering it. But we'll give it a go. I reckon I can get most of the dent out with this. Okay, I'm just going to try this, so I'll just press it very gently and see what happens. I can feel some resistance there. That's not bad, but the problem I'm going to have here is it's not going to fully extend that outer edge. I'll just give it a few more presses and just see if we can get it better than that. Well, there it is after the second press. That's the area that was dented there. And you can see it's still slightly distorted. I'll give it a bit more. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there. That's way better than what it was. There's a close-up look at the area that I just repaired on the hydraulic press, and there are some very small dents in that surface there, and that's from an initial attempt I made with a nylon face mallet on a mandrel, thinking that nylon wouldn't affect the nickel silver, but it did. Left quite serious dents in there really. And also there's a very slight ridge just here. Now that's obviously where the base is soldered to the inside of that rim there. Now I'm going to try sanding this. I've got some double O grit emery cloth and I've double side taped that to that little block that I made. And I'm going to go over this now and just see what happens. So I can see there it's sanding either side of the area that I tried to press out there, which means this is still low, and ideally what we should do is sort of get that to come out a bit further. Now I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that though. I could hammer this from the inside against this other hammer form that I made, hoping to sort of knock that out a bit. That's probably the best way. I don't think I can press that any further on the hydraulic press. I just found this old ball peen hammer in a drawer there, and I've modified it. So I've ground off the top surface of the rear of the hammer, and I've polished up the front face there, and it matches the curvature on the inside of the rim of the teapot. So I'm going to try hammering this on this composite hammer form. Now I don't need to go too far with this, it's just a matter of raising this surface a bit so that we can sand it back and maintain the curvature of the outside form of the teapot. So I'll just mark the area that I need to work on there so I can see what I'm doing. That matches with the outside. Now the downside of this is that it's going to dent the inside of the rim. There's sort of not much you can do about that though. Okay, I'll try again with the sanding block and just see if that's made any difference. Okay, it's a bit better, but it's still low, so I need to work on that some more and try and get that this edge to come out further. So I'll do that and we'll come back to the bench. I'll just do it off camera. Okay, well I have hammered that a fair bit more from the inside, and I'm worried that I'm going to really damage that inside edge there. You can see all the dents in there, but I can polish that out probably with a drum sander on a Dremel. This is probably not as important as the contour of that outside face there. Now I think what's happening now is this is raised quite a lot just here, and if I keep sanding that I think I'll get to the bottom of this little depression just underneath my fingernail there. So I'm going to switch over to a more aggressive abrasive, and I'll see if I can get down to the bottom of that little hollow section there, and then we could switch back to some finer abrasives. It turns out it's a lot easier to do this in the woodwork vise, having the vise open and just putting the curvature of the teapot in the gap there, and I've got some of this soft resilient foam to protect the silver plate on the other side. Now that patch is getting smaller, and it's just a matter of working at it, I think. So I can feel fairly slight hollow in there. I'm going to have to take a lot of metal off here to get this down at the bottom of that dent there. I'd really like to be able to get that out further. What I need is like a punch that I can get right down adjacent to that rim there and give that a really good whack, but I'm worried about cracking open the joint, so I'm not going to do that. I think I'm just going to persevere with this. Yeah, it's wearing out my fingers. I might have to switch abrasives too. Sort of getting closer. Okay, I'm nearly there. Now there are a number of very small dents. There's one there, there's a pair there, there's a bit of a blemish about there somewhere. Now I guarantee that was from when I attacked this with a nylon face mallet. There was probably a metal chip embedded in the face of the mallet, and it's led to those dents there, which is a good reason for not rushing into something. You should really sit and think about it. With any of these decorative metals, they take dents so easily, and they can be quite deep. and that means that you then got to remove a lot of stock around that dent to get to the bottom of the imperfection. Now I think I can get it. The good news is that the rest of the curvature at the base of the teapot is good. So I'm not seeing any sort of drastic change in the reflection pattern in the metal, which means that the contour is still pretty good. So I'm just going to keep working on it, and I'm pretty sure I can get to the bottom of those dents. The other option would be to soft solder into those dents and clean up the soft solder and then silver plate over that. But that's sort of a last resort. I'm going to keep going with this. I'll see if I can get it. Okay, I put a new piece of abrasive on the block and I've been putting a lot more pressure on it, and I reckon I've nearly got it. There's a little tiny mark there. I'm just going to keep going with this 120 grit, and then I'm going to swap out some finer abrasives, and I think I'll get to the bottom of that. Alright, this is where we're at. Now I sanded over that with that 180 grit emery cloth until about 99% of that little blemish was gone, which was right there. Then I switched to 400 grit wet and dry, rubbing that dry with a sort of a resilient rubber sanding block. And then I switched to 600 grit, then 800 grit, and finally 1000 grit, and I did the 1000 grit wet. So that's what it looks like now, and I'm really happy that I got rid of that dent. So what we need to do now is to polish this. Now I'm going to do this on the buffing machine with a polishing mop, but then I'll finish up with a bit of soft cloth and some brass polish, and that will give me the final luster before we try and put the silver plate back on again. Now just looking at this really carefully, it probably doesn't show up on camera, but this yellowy coloured metal is the nickel silver. Then there's the faintest tinge of copper, and then finally the silver. So I'd say what happened here was it was flash dipped in copper, and that just puts a very, very thin copper film on it, and the silver went over the top of that. Okay, that's it after buffing. Now I didn't go overboard, I just used a soft cotton mop and a very fine abrasive, and I just worked across in that direction. And the idea here is just to check for any scratches that might have been left from the previous abrasives. Now I'm going to use a metal polish now, like a paste polish on a soft cloth, and we'll do the final polish with that. But I need to cut up some cloth, and I've got a new tool for doing that, so let me show you. Okay, this just arrived in the mail. Now I paid full price for this. I saw an ad on Instagram actually, and it's called the Rag Cutter. It's made in New Zealand. This one is made of recycled plastic. There is another version that's orange that's made of recyclable virgin plastic, and these are brilliant from what I've seen anyway. And the idea is that if you've ever tried to tear up an old t-shirt, you sort of get to the seam and it doesn't want to tear any further. You've got to get a pair of scissors or a knife or something, try and cut through those doubled up seams. But with this you just run it down through this groove here, and the blade is actually angled and the blade is replaceable. I believe that is just a standard Stanley single edge blade, and I've got a whole stack of those. So I'm going to go and get this up on the wall and we'll give it a try. I've just screwed this between these two doors here, and behind this door I've got a big tub full of old clothes, and my wife sort of regularly gives me stuff and this is a pair of her old pajamas. I know, sexy aren't they? But there is a seam right there, and if you try to tear this, you still got to sort of put a cut in it to get it going, and you try and tear it and it sort of gets to the seam and doesn't go any further. So let's give this a try. Hey, look at that. How easy is that? And then I think you can open it up. So we'll put it back on there again, and we just do that, and there's the seam, and you can see how it's opened that up really easily. So I reckon they're brilliant. When I first saw it, I thought I can reverse engineer that and I'll 3D print it, and I've got one of my own. And then I sort of felt sorry for the guy, because obviously a lot of thought and there's a lot of money went into the tooling to make this injection molded part, and I thought, you know, really should support him. I think it cost me about, I'll have to check, I think it was about $40 to get it posted here to Australia. But yeah, I reckon this is brilliant. I'll use it all the time. It feels a bit awkward. You sort of got to pull it from the bottom, but it just goes through so easily. And it also cuts through the hem really easily as well. So there you go, rag cutter, should get one. I just polished most of this using a product called Auto Sol. It's just a paste type metal polish. So all you need is just a soft cloth, a little bit of polish, and just rub really hard. And I must say this nickel silver is much easier to polish than brass. I did a project a while ago that had a lot of brass that needed to be electroplated, and it really gave me a lot of grief. But this, after the 1000 grit wet and dry, is just polishing up really, really easily. I'm working my way up onto the silver as well. Now there are a lot of scratches in this already. I mean, it's an old piece. But once we get the silver on this bare nickel silver here, I'll give the whole thing a polish. We don't want it to look brand new necessarily. Alright, so you sort of get the idea. I'll keep working on this, and then it has to be cleaned really thoroughly, and I'll do that in the ultrasonic cleaner. But here's the area that we've repaired just here, and it's pretty hard to see where the dent was, so I think that's worked out really well. Now the process we're going to do today is called brush plating, and it's a form of electroplating where you don't actually need to completely immerse the part into any sort of alkaline or acidic solution. Now what you need to buy is this solution here. Now this one is made by Caswell. I went through Caswell Australia. You can use the US site if you wish. And this is called Silver Plug and Plate Solution, 120 mils. It cost me $74 Australian. If you buy it from the US site, it's about $67. And Caswell make these brush plating solutions for all sorts of metals. So you can get it in gold, in rose gold, black chrome, nickel, silver, copper. Just about any metal plating solution can be done in this way. Now you'll also need a wand. This is stainless steel and it's specifically for silver. Some of the other metal solutions need a brass wand. If you go on the Caswell website, it'll tell you which one you actually need. But it's just a strip of stainless steel and it's bent like a hockey stick at the end there. You'll also need something to actually transfer that chemical solution onto the part you want to plate. And I bought these from Caswell, and these are a Tyvek strip of bandage basically. And it costs about 50 cents for a plastic bag. If you don't want to buy it, you can get a pair of disposable overalls. They're usually made of Tyvek, or hospital scrubs. They're usually made from the same material. And you just cut off a strip and then wrap it around the end of the wand, and then your power supply is connected to that wand, and the other clip of your power supply goes to the part that you want to plate. Now the power supply I'm using is this one here. It's a variable DC power supply, but you only need 1.7 volts, so you could actually use one of these little chargers if you wish. You need to go onto the Caswell website and work out which voltage you need for which solution. But for silver, it's 1.7 volts. Some of them need 4.5 volts. So I'll be using this, but yeah, you don't need to buy a fancy power supply if you've got one of these lying around. Now, you might be wondering, how do I know this actually works? Well, here's one I did earlier. Now, this one belonged to my mother. And when I inherited this, it was completely black. And I think either all of the silver had corroded off, or it had been polished off at some point, and the nickel silver underneath was being exposed and it had oxidized. And I tried polishing it and it was clear that there wasn't much silver left on this at all. So I thought about getting it electroplated using the immersion process, where you actually put it into a bath of alkaline or acidic solution, but I was worried about what would happen to this ceramic. Now I couldn't get this rim off the ceramic bowl, so I decided to go with the brush plating process, and it worked perfectly. So I did this one about 4 years ago. I took it out of the cupboard upstairs, the china cabinet, and it's still good. So I do know it works, so I'm going to give it a try in the teapot, see how we get on. I'm just giving the teapot a scrub in the sink next door, and I've used some of this simple green cleaner. This is the concentrate. You can mix that with water, and it's a fairly benign sort of cleaner, but it does a good job of cleaning metal. And I'm going to do a piece of copper tube as well with a silver plate, just so you can see really clearly the change in the colour when we put the silver on the copper. You won't notice it so much on the nickel silver or the existing silver plate. So I'll pop that in there as well. So we're going to run the ultrasonic cleaner for about 10 minutes. I've got the same solution in that, but I'm using hot water. And then we'll take that out, rinse it really well. And you must wear gloves after it comes out of the ultrasonic cleaner so you don't transfer any oil from your skin onto the part. With this stainless steel wand, I've cleaned the end of that. I've scrubbed it on a Scotch-Brite wheel just to ensure there's no oxide or dirt on that. And in the instructions that Kaz will give you, they say you should wrap this Tyvek around the wand loosely. If it's too tight, it won't allow the solution to leak through and make contact with the stainless steel wand. So just sort of wrap it loosely, just make sure it doesn't come off though. If you get bare stainless steel and it touches the part, you'll get a burn mark. I'll tie this up off camera and then we'll come back and we'll try plating the copper. Alright, I ended up using a rubber band. It's a lot easier than trying to tie it with gloves on. Okay, now we're going to fill up our little plastic cup here with some of this solution. And then we'll put the wand and the Tyvek in there and just make sure it's soaked through. I'll get that piece of copper out and I'll rinse it next door. Now there it is there, but I'll rinse off that simple green. Just so there's no chance I'll knock that over, I'll put that in the other part of this set. Alrighty, now we need our power supply and we want the positive going to the wand and negative goes to our part. Rightio, power on, and it should just be a matter of making contact with the part, and you can see almost straight away you get the silver on there, and it's just a matter of keeping the wand moving. If you let it sit in one place, you'll get a burn mark. And you just basically keep going until the silver stops depositing, then you dip it in the solution and go again. You can see it there, and if it looks a bit dull you can polish that up later. Now, I won't go any further with that, don't want to waste it, so we'll now work on the teapot. Alright, this big patch here was where that purple stain was, that bit of corrosion. And just looking really closely, there is a nick in the nickel silver. So I think what's happened is it's been scratched right through to the base metal, and then that's allowed oxygen to get in there and start to oxidize a bigger patch of the nickel silver, and then the silver on top probably just corroded away. So let's see if we can patch this up. Now there is a difference in colour. The area that I'm doing now looks more of a dull grey, but I think this will polish up quite okay later on. So I'll do a larger area than we need to. And the longer you do this, the thicker the coating of silver will be. They recommend, around about 3 to 5 minutes, but you can go longer if you wish. It's important you keep moving. Alright, I'll do the other side. This is the bit that we repaired in the press. It's definitely got a sort of a bluish tinge. And technically you could do the whole thing. You could just keep working over the entire surface and completely recoat it in used silver if you wanted to. Not sure if that's really necessary. Okay, now I'll keep going with this off camera, but I think we started to cover up all of the nickel silver. It's just now a matter of blending in the new silver with the old stuff. So I'll keep working this off camera and I'll bring you back when it's rinsed and dried, and we'll try polishing that up with some silver polish. I spent about another 5 minutes on that off camera, and it's sort of a bit blotchy, but we're going to polish that now. And I'm using this silver polish. This has been around forever. I remember using this as a child to clean my mother's silver, and I've already done this one. This was part of the set, and this had some little speckle marks all over it where there were pinholes in the silver, and the corrosion was showing up as sort of dark brown pimples all over the surface of that. So I cleaned that off with that 1000 grit wet and dry and buffed it, and I've done that one already and polished it. It's looking pretty good. But let's have a go at this one. So it's probably not showing up in camera, but it looks a bit brown and blotchy there. But that is now a lot more uniform in colour. So I'll do this one all over, and then I'll bring you back and I'll show you the finished result. Okay, I've gone through and I've polished that all over now, and this was the edge that was dented, and I'm really happy with that. It's pretty hard to spot where it was, just about impossible. This was the side where the big patch was in the centre, where the nickel silver was exposed, and that was the whole reason why I started this restoration process. Now after I polished that, I wasn't happy with it. I went back and actually plated it again, and I think it's now turned out much more uniform. Now, is it perfect? No, it's not. And this is a piece that's unrestored. So this is part of the original set, and I didn't touch this one. And it's got nicks and cuts and scratches all over it. That's just the way it is with old silverware. It's suffers a lot of wear and tear even if you don't use it regularly. And this one here is the one that had the little speckles of corrosion. And again, I think that's turned out as good as this one here, the unrestored one. So really happy with the way these have turned out. Now I'll leave a link in the description to the Caswell website if you're looking to do any brush plating. And I'll also leave a link to the rag cutter. Now I paid full price for all of these things. It's not like they're sponsoring me, but I think this stuff is worthwhile, and I reckon that rag cutter is great. So check out the description, you'll find the links for those things. Now I'm going to finish up today with some wildlife footage, as I do, and also I'm going to include some footage that my son captured with his drone. Now he brought it over from New Zealand, put the drone up over our house and took some video. I was absolutely blown away with how crisp and clear the video was, but it'll give you a sense of where we live and how we're surrounded by bush, and that's one of the reasons why we tend to have a lot of wildlife close to the house. So please enjoy that, and I'll check you on the next video. I've got something completely different, so come back for that. But it's Prezzo signing out for now. Cheers.